Boop boop bop ba dum bum. Boop boop bop ba dum ba da dum da dum da dum ba dum bum. Beep bop boop bop boop bop boop da ba dum bum. Beep bop boop bop boop 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 bum.
This is our video for the third quarter of 2018. We'll start with a plank physical fitness as the balance portion, and then we'll have an opinionated discussion by me of the third quarter of the year 2018. Thanks for visiting. Enjoy the video. Okay, this is David Lentz. It's September the 23rd, and I was fortunate enough to be able to run 5 miles today in exactly 1 hour. That's kind of an interesting accomplishment because I have been languishing in the 12 to 13 and a half minute mile range for the last several months, and it was quite depressing. And anyway, I've been on a weight reduction program, and I basically have lost 5 pounds this month, but I've probably since I was up to around 228, and I'm down to 215.4 as we speak. So anyway, so I'm feeling kind of frisky, and so what I've decided to do is, when you're hot, you're hot. When you're not, you're not. I'm gonna see how successful I can be at doing a plank. So here goes. Sorry for the delay there. Okay, here we go. I don't know how long this is going to take. I'll withhold judgment. Let's see what happens here. All right. Go. I believe that's 1 minute. Okay, that's 2 minutes. I think that was 2 minutes and 16 seconds. We'll say 2:15, but I think it was 2:16. Okay, this is Dave Lentz. Well, it is September the 23rd, 2018. We are coming to the close of the third quarter. We do have 1 week left to go. So in that sense, I guess this video is premature, but my ability to crank out these videos has been spotty lately, so I'm trying to move forward. In any event, let's talk about the stock market. I think at the end of the first half, back on the last week of June, I basically made the recommendation not to invest in the stock market. I said I did that with some trepidation, simply because the theory that we follow here is we pretty much follow the idea that the securities markets are efficient and that it's difficult to, that it's virtually impossible in the long run to outguess the market, and it's generally not a good idea for that reason not to try to time the market in terms of when to make investment decisions. Basically, it's a properly weighted diversification to basically capture in your investment portfolio the entire market. There are ways to do that, normally through exchange-traded funds or what have you, and not to try to time the market. And then that's the basic theory here. And then, but basically, despite that, I violated my own rule, so to speak, and basically said that I thought that the market was looking very fragile. And I basically said that if you think you're going to need your money anytime soon, if you were invested, that the market itself to me looked perilous at the time, basically because of with the tax cut given earlier this year as part of basically President Trump's economic stimulus. That's going to raise the federal deficit sooner or later. I think that's going to have an adverse effect on what have been low interest rates. This bull market, has been exceptionally long-lived, been around for several years now, longer than other bull markets. And also there were the trade worries. Now, let me just say this. And so I said I thought for those who were market timers, that might be a bad time to be in the market. And then, of course, the market promptly turned around. And I think since the end of the year, it's probably up 700 or 800 points, making me look like an idiot. But it just goes to prove that it's difficult to time the market. Now, I was a Series 7 stockbroker, registered representative about 30 years ago. And I've taught finance. But let me just say this. I think that there are even situations where guys that have won Nobel Prizes in finance have put together funds to try to make money under some theory that they've come up with, and have lost money on the market. The point is that basically the market is all publicly available information is already factored into stock prices every second of the day. And for most people, there may be some inside information that some people may have knowledge of. Trading on inside information is usually illegal. Anyway, the bottom line is that for 99% of the folks out there, if not 99.99, it's not normally wise to try to time the market. But in any event, let me just say this, that the size of the federal deficit still bothers me. President Trump's
messing around with tariffs are not, well, let's put it this way. If you've seen our video on David Ricardo, and we've done several videos on international trade, points out the advantages of international trade from a theoretical standpoint. And interestingly enough, the market itself seems to believe that Trump is not going to go through, or the Trump and the Chinese, for all of their blowing of hot air about retaliation and we're going to impose these tariffs. The market apparently does not believe that either side is really going to go through with it, that it's a lot of posturing and blowing of a lot of hot air, because every time, but you'll notice that every time the market thinks there's going to be a trade deal, it has, in other words, that we're going to be more pro-free trade, not have all these tariffs, the market goes up, and every time they think we're not going to have a deal, it either goes down or it just sits there. And the point that I'm making is that the market seems to be taking into account what the market believes is that all this, that's sort of laughing at Trump and basically saying, we know you're going to end up not in the long run imposing these tariffs, because we know darn well what you know, which is it's in the country's best interest to have as much free trade as possible. Now, let me just say this. The one thing that I got to say on Trump's behalf is that I do think that pirating and getting intellectual property rights ironed out is very, very important. And on a certain level, I sort of am somewhat supportive of the administration and sort of sticking it to the Chinese a little bit on the intellectual property issues, because this has to do not only with stealing our secrets, but the desire or the ability of people to innovate. It's a real, it goes to fairness, it goes to national security, it goes to a lot of issues. But this issue about pirating and not obeying each other's copyrights, it goes to music, it goes to inventions about software inventions, defense, all that kind of stuff. It probably is something that needs to be ironed out. Not sure that going about it the way it's being pursued is necessarily the best, but at least in terms of for free trade purists, and I'm not a total purist on free trade, but I'm pretty close, and what I'm saying is that there's something to be said for trying to get the Chinese, as well as other folks, on board in terms of intellectual property rights and observing each other's patents, respecting them, their copyrights, their trademarks, etc., etc. Let me just say this. My own perception of the president is that he is a politician who obviously believes in some element of misdirection and some element of, frankly, bullying. Now, in terms of the misdirection, of course, on an international level, and especially if you're talking about military matters, sometimes that can lead to misunderstandings in terms of willingness to, quote, pull the trigger, which could be exceedingly dangerous. In terms of misdirection, saying one thing and doing another, then you have to believe that as a campaigner, if you really believe in what that person is, what positions he says he's taking. What the president, all I can say is this, what the president says, the president of the United States says, and I'm not talking about Trump, I'm just saying generally, what the president of the United States says matters. It affects stock markets, it affects other
countries and their willingness to not take up arms. The United States is still the leading economic power in the world. It's going to affect their politics. It's going to affect everything. And so if you're constantly saying things that are frankly a bunch of baloney, if you're the president, you're saying, and you know full well that that's not what you believe, there is, in fact, a great risk of miscommunication, which could precipitate serious conflict. And it may have very adverse effects and wacky effects on financial markets because the markets pay attention to what the president has to say. Anyway, enough of that. The other thing about the president is also, he apparently does not like multilateral treaties, and he likes to deal one-on-one. And on a certain level, looking at it from one perspective, that approach makes perfect sense, because if the United States deals in terms of trade with each individual country on an individual basis, well, in every negotiation, we're the big hitter, and we're dealing with somebody that's not a very big hitter, unless we're dealing with the Chinese or Europe. So I can see why he wants to engage in that strategy. The problem is that sooner or later, what's going to happen is all these countries are going to have to engage in some sort of negotiations with each other, and you wonder whether or not those countries are going to be able to stick with the deals that they have with the United States. I don't know, but I still have to figure that one out myself. I understand the strategy behind it. These multilateral treaties where we came up with the World Trade Organization, and et cetera, which I very much believe in the World Trade Organization. I think that any time you're trying to come up with a fair way, short of war, to resolve disputes, that you have to have a neutral party, one that everyone perceives as being neutral and fair, employing a bunch of set rules. It goes to this issue of respect for the law and respect for your treaties. Trump coming in and basically throwing everything out the door makes inherently our negotiating credibility in the future very, very weak. I mean, this has thrown out years and years and years of trying to get these multilateral treaties, and in any situation like this, political moderates try to convince hardliners in other countries to go along with it, to give it a shot, because it's in the interest of peace and in the interest of trade. And then you kind of have somebody come along and throw all these treaties out, like the one with Iran, for example. It basically makes that treaty with Iran took years. I mean, and it was, it's short term, had a short duration. It's like any treaty. It's like any agreement. I'm a lawyer. Any settlement agreement, if it's a fair settlement agreement, that means that both sides probably think they didn't do quite as well as they should, but they can live with it. That's usually a fair treaty if the parties are really at each other's throats and it's a hard negotiation. So I worry about this country's ability to have any credibility when it negotiates in the future, and the only credibility we're going to have is, the stick, like military or the amount of aid we're going to give. Well, let me tell you something. China, especially, is going to be in a position to give countries aid in the future, and so all I'm saying is that if these negotiations with other countries are not successful, we are going to in the future have a difficult time at basically negotiating in good faith. We frankly, this whole process has made every third world country's fear, or some, the real radicals, the real America haters out there have always said we're nothing but a bunch of imperialist, white, racist pigs. And a lot of what Trump has done, frankly, has shown them to be, frankly, correct. And because his natural tendency is to be a little bit of a bully. Not be a little bit of a bully, but to be a bully. If anybody knows, if you give him a chance to be a bully, he's going to be a bully. And under the previous administration, especially the Obama administration, the approach had been to at least attempt, in good faith, to deal on the basis of principle and on the basis of fairness. And normally, if you want to get an adversary or any human being to go along with anything, if they think that they're being treated fairly and as an equal, that they're being respected and not pushed, they're going to more likely, in good faith, want to stick by the deal. And they're not going to have resentment. If you've been bullied into a deal, you may comply with the deal thereafter, but let me tell you, the whole time you're stewing. You're going to sit there and resent it. And this is another issue that's going to be raised in the future because of what's going on right now. And also, let no mistake be about it, in terms of, I think that everybody on the planet, in terms of other countries, are soon going to realize that Trump's basic international strategy is, to quote, to divide and conquer. He is going to basically try to get cancellation of multilateral treaties and negotiate individually with each country, because he's the big hitter there and he can get the best deal if he goes one-on-one. And on some level, at some point, the other countries are going to realize that they're going to have to stick together. And I think that one has to. If I'm sitting across the table from Trump, I am not going to. Frankly, he's not going to have very much credibility with me. All he's going to have is military and bucks, maybe. And I'm not sure if he can be trusted, frankly, to do what he says he's going to do. And how long is this deal going to last before he tries to push me around again? And so that's what I think that the policy of the United States is right now. And I think that it's not rule based, it's not principle based, other than on raw naked power. That's it. I do agree, like I said, I do agree with that. There needs to be some consensus developed on the basis of intellectual property. I think he's sort of right on that issue, but I just not sure about. And I'm still the one thing apparently Trump believes in terms of the negotiation with the Chinese, that they import more goods than we do. Or excuse me, we import more of their goods than they import of ours, which means that in a tariff fight, they eventually have less to impose tariffs on than we do, and for that and that therefore they, on that basis, they're going to lose any fight. Any trade fight, the Chinese will lose any trade fight. I still am not. I've seen some discussion of the currency ramifications of all of this, and the Chinese have said they would, quote, never use undervaluation of Chinese currency to try to get around a trade war. In other words, the Chinese are saying, we're going to play nice regardless of what Trump does. Well, I don't totally believe that. The Chinese probably have manipulated their currency in the past. So I don't believe that. That's number one. Number two, and I still haven't seen that much discussion of this, frankly, and I'm sort of shocked. But especially with the size of the federal deficit under the Trump tax cut, it's just huge right now. I mean, in the future, when that deficit gets to be financed, because the federal government's going to have to issue bonds to finance these deficits. Suppose the Chinese decide not to buy. Now, forget about selling what the U.S. dollars that they have and the U.S. bonds that they have. Just suppose that they just decide, well, we'll hold on to what we have, but we're not going to buy any future treasury bills, treasury bonds, or anything like that in the future. We're just not going to do it. It would seem to me that in and of itself would have a huge effect on interest rates here and would cause them to skyrocket or go up substantially. And if interest rates go up here, guess what? That makes U.S. currency values higher relative to the yuan or renminbi of China, which also should work to help the Chinese export element of their economy and hurt ours. And not only that, it would hurt interest rates here. And but the markets don't seem to think that. So I must be in error about that, or I'm the most brilliant international negotiation strategist in the world. I don't know, but I have not seen very much discussion of that angle of this, and I would be very interested in that, somebody commenting on that point. Anyway, so it is September the 23rd, 2018. I'm sorry for the quality of the video, but actually I wanted to just try it out to see what it looked like, and I don't like it, but I might just go ahead and publish this baby anyway. Anyway, this is Dave Lentz, giving you my thoughts on the close of the third quarter. Like I said, I don't try to time the market, but if you insist, on timing the market, to me, if you're in, I'd get out, and if you're out, I'd stay there. So what's out? I mean, I'm talking about people that think that they're going to need their cash either within a year or two to retire or for whatever purpose. If you don't need your money, for the foreseeable future, and you're going to have it in there for several years, historically, the stock market outperforms bonds. Diversify and sort of buy and hold, and don't worry too much about it. Just employ our diversification, buy and hold overall strategy. This is David Lentz. Thanks for visiting. We'll talk later.